All right, it was a night full of feeling relief that my life was going to change in a different way, going in a different way, but at the same time, it's the fear of the unknown, because I know so many people right now that are looking for a job. And yesterday, while I was looking for jobs in the minimum wage category, you can see that there's just not a whole lot of full-time work available out there. And it's just going to be a moving again laterally in my life in which I'm going to start having to spend a lot of my income, a lot of my main income just on paying for rent. And that's going to be very exhausting. And I was thinking of just taking a part-time job and then just doing YouTube as the other half of my monthly income because it's going to pay about the same amount because hourly minimum wage work is about $300 a week. That's what some people that I know are making right now. And that's at $18 an hour part time. The Arizona minimum wage is $14.35. And I think that's where I'm going to end up. And a lot of you are probably wondering, it's like, well, why don't you just get a job that's equal to your current job? And this is the simple reason. And I've mentioned this before, and a lot of people just don't understand this. And it's something that many of you will have to come to terms with. And that's why I've decided to make this the main part of this video. So, when you have a job that isn't specialized, right? It's a combination of multiple jobs, including things that are outside of the scope of your particular job, right? So you have to be able to do multiple jobs, including like HR, accounts payable, technology, janitor work, maintenance. You've got to be able to do a lot of different things. But what that looks like on paper is nothing. So you have no specialization, so you can't really put a job like this on a resume for another job that specifically has certain obligations. Like yesterday, I hadn't seen how many entry level jobs require a cert, require a network or certification. They all of the jobs that I was applying on Indeed had these cert requirements, and I'm like, these certifications mean nothing, but they're requiring them for entry level jobs, and you're like, this is ridiculous. That an entry level job has a certification on it for a $15 an hour job, and you're just like, well, my current job has a lot of high level responsibilities, including the management of millions and millions of dollars worth of stuff. And so, even though it seems like a lot of responsibility on paper, managing all these things doesn't make me a manager on paper. It just shows that they were filling me up with responsibility for the minimal amount of money, and then when they don't need you anymore they make all these excuses for why you're bad at what you're doing, but they're the ones that gave you all of this responsibility that you can't use. And that's the great thing about the corporations these days is they want to make the jobs as useless as humanly possible while extracting as much labor from you as they possibly can, but making it nearly impossible for you to leave for the same amount of money because on paper, on your resume, you can't show any specific, what do you call this, skills that you've developed. So many of us end up working in jobs very similar to mine in which you just don't have the skill set to go and make the same amount of money. And it's intentional. Giving people upgraded titles means that they are going to be able to go somewhere else with that title and be able to do a job for more money than the current company is willing to pay you. And that's kind of been the industry standard for at least the last 10 years, where you skill up at a current job. And then once you reach a certain level with your skills, then you take them right across the street and you get paid more. But what the corporations figured out is like they want to give a very specialized task to you that you can't go sell across the street. So that puts you in a perpetual dependency. And again, my job, even my current job right now, is a desperation job. Like, no one would do this much work unless they couldn't find something better in a more specialized field. So you end up having to stay there for as long as Evil Corp needs you. And once they don't need you, then you end up in a situation like mine, where now I have no skills. I have 3 years of basically empty space on my resume, and I'm going to have to use something else. And that's why I'm looking at minimum wage jobs, because when they look at me, it's like, well, did you learn this, and this technology there? No, I was a generalist. I took care of everything. And that doesn't even qualify you to be an office manager, because I don't have any, I don't have any actual office. I just sat in a big room for 3 years, and I did a lot of paperwork. And so there's no specific skill for doing paperwork. You just come in, you do your work on paper, and then you go home. And as long as you're a useful idiot, they keep you around. But once you start making too much noise, once you start becoming unhinged at work because of the stress of the job, and it may not be your stress. It may be coming from other people near you who are starting to see that things aren't going the way that they had planned. And a lot of the reasons why they don't go smoothly anymore is because you start cutting and cutting and cutting. Like, my group has lost 3 or 4 people at this point, and this week we only had 2 people show up to work because everyone else was sick. And you had one of the most disastrous weeks that I have seen in my entire tenure at this particular Evil Corp. Is that things started breaking Monday morning. Like, I showed up to work and I tried to get onto my work computer, and it just sat there for like 25 minutes. At that point, the people from the surrounding offices started coming to me and asking me, why is nothing working? And of course, no one wants to admit that this was a problem that they foresaw 3 months ago, when I started saying, hey, these things are breaking over here. It's like, oh, shut up, millennials team. You don't know what you're talking about. That's pretty much what they said to me. You don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, okay. So I kept my mouth shut, and then the things kept getting bad again, and they kept getting worse. And suddenly it is really bad, and you're just kind of like, look around. It's like, you know what? I'm just not going to say anything. And eventually it gets so bad that they have to acknowledge the fact, and you're just like, I'm just not going to say anything. But again, you're kind of put into this situation with Evil Corp, in which they don't want to hear it. They don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want anyone saying anything about it. That's the big one, I think, that is really gotten me into a lot of troubles. They don't want anyone saying anything about it. They don't want anyone talking, because if there's one thing that gets you labeled as a troublemaker, is that you start talking to people about what's going on. And then they start like really like hyper focusing on you. And I'm like, I have nothing to do with this. I'm just the one that's been saying, hey, let's all look over there and stop pretending that nothing's wrong. It's like there's a dumpster fire behind us. We can feel the heat from it, right? But everyone's looking in the opposite direction. Everyone's looking at the sunset in the opposite direction, and they just keep ignoring the the flaming dumpster. And you can smell it, you can feel the heat, but you're just told not to look that way because it's ugly. And so then you end up like I have, where it's like I've been staring straight at the dumpster fire for 3 months, and I'm just like, yeah, you know what? I think it's time for me to walk in the opposite direction. And so that's the analogy that I'm going to use. It's time for me to walk in the opposite direction and move away because there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who've all been laid off or fired or uh, mostly having to force themselves in order to find something that pays them more money because they can't live off the current wages. That's a big one right now in corporate America, is that these greedy corporations know what the cost of living is and they're not willing to pay a living wage. So that forces their workers to either starve or go look for something else because it's not covering rent, it's not covering food, it's not covering gas, and you're losing your mind trying to work in a place that has a dumpster fire at it. So that's where I'm going to leave it this morning. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.